I want to start with politics and another Donald Trump rally. Chris?
Yeah, if you thought that just because it was the holidays, that it was going to be nice and quiet, you forgot Donald Trump is in this race. The editorial board of New Hampshire's top newspaper left little to the imagination with regard to how they feel about Donald Trump. Trump blasted right back at a rally last night. So here's how it began. The union leader published a front-page editorial saying Trump insults voters' intelligence. Publisher Joe McQuaid compared Trump to Biff from Back to the Future. Quote, Trump has shown himself to be a crude blowhard with no clear political philosophy and no deeper understanding of the important and serious role of President of the United States than one of the goons he lets rough up protesters in his crowds. And while campaigning in Nashua, Trump compared that paper to Iowa's Des Moines Register, whose editorial board called on the frontrunner to drop out of the race this summer.
Between that and the union leader, which I think might be worse, okay? What a pile of garbage that newspapers. So we had an interesting thing, because you have a very dishonest newspaper up here. It's also a failing newspaper. It's going down the tubers. I remember when this was a big paper. Look at the size of this thing. If they cut it down anymore, you won't be able to find it. It looks like the things, you know, when you go to the grocery store where they give you a little handout. What do they call them? Coupons. This was a big power here years ago. Although, think of this. In 36 years, since 1980, okay, think of that. Since 1980, they've picked one president. It was Ronald Reagan. They endorsed one guy who ran and won for president. So they're one out of a 36-year period, right? They've got one, and they're not going to win this time, that I can tell you, okay?
Well, so then Trump took aim at the union leader's 2016 pick, who is New Jersey Governor Chris Christie, saying that he is the newspaper is his lapdog. So publisher Joe McQuaid says that they asked him, meaning Donald, to tweet support for Christie to get on the main stage in November's debate.
Because when he called me up a couple of months ago to see if I can get Christie onto the main stage, I said, I think he's going to endorse Christie, right? Why would he be doing that? And the first time I met with him, he said, I'll never endorse Christie. And the reason he said that, he hated that Christie embraced Obama so strongly before the election, right before the election. When I saw it, I said, I think he's going to vote for Obama. I don't call it a hug. I call it a hug mentally. It was like, it was unbelievable. He was like a little boy. Oh, I'm with the president. Remember, he flew in the helicopter, and he was all excited to be in the helicopter. I said, I would have put you in my helicopter. It's much nicer. You've had tremendous downgrades, either 9 or 11 downgrades of the bonds. It's number 50 out of 50 in terms of economic development and in terms of the economy. It's like one of the worst in the country for jobs. It's a disaster. I have property in New Jersey. The taxes are through the roof. You know, I've been friends with Christie, but when McQuaid, who's really Christie's lapdog, I will tell you, that's all it is. First of all, I know you're happy he's up here because he's up here. But, you know, the people in New Jersey want to throw him out of office. They say, well, why isn't he running New Jersey? We're a disaster state. We're going to hell, and our governor's up in New Hampshire every single day having town hall meetings. He ought to be doing it in New Jersey, in all fairness, okay?
So now you're jumping out of your seats to get in. But one more thing after we watch that untraditional Donald. He's making moves toward a more traditional campaign after doubts that his rallies will translate to Election Day victories. So Politico reporting this morning that his campaign quietly signed an agreement to access the Republican National Committee's voter file. Other campaigns use that database for their get-out-the-vote efforts, and information Trump collects from supporters will be fed back to the database for future use by the party. Meanwhile, Fox News is reporting that Trump is preparing to spend $2 million a week on television ads starting next month. Trump actually hinted at that last night.
I'll believe that when I see it.
Starting around January 4th, we're spending a lot of money. We're going out and spending a lot. I loved the concept of saying, I spent the least and I'm the best result, because that's what it's all about.
Where to begin after all of that, Nicole Wallace? I mean, his communication skills, we've talked about it on this set before. This is a guy who can take anything that happens to him and turn it to his advantage.
Well, and I think it is to be expected that the establishment newspapers in the early primary states are a target. And you predicted this at noon yesterday.
It's not a fair fight. You know, like here is this paper which, you know, was once a big player in New Hampshire and obviously has lost a little influence in addition to its subscribers. And, you know, he has this megaphone that they just can't match. And so it was obvious that he was going to tear it up and throw it in the audience. But, you know, I have a question for Howard. You and I are the only two who've run for president before. So let me pose this question to you. I think the biggest thing that happened yesterday was the agreement with the RNC for its voter file. Because we had all this, the subtext of the Donald Trump candidacy was, well, he's doing this, he's getting a lot of press, but is he actually going to turn the enthusiasm into hard votes? And this suggests to me that he's making a play to do just that.
He has to do that everywhere, but it's essential in Iowa, and I think it's too late for him in Iowa. I think Cruz wins Iowa. He's up by 10 points. He's got the religious right, who really do have a great machine in Iowa. I don't see how, but it's not as essential in New Hampshire in a primary state, but it's important. You've got to have voter contact one-on-one, and that's what he's doing.
What does the voter file get you, basically? I mean, from a presidential campaign's perspective.
It gets you a lot.
Okay.
What it gets you is the ability.
Explain what you get when you...
When you sign onto the voter file, and these are far more advanced than they were when we put them together.
Right.
You basically get every name of anybody who's ever voted in a Republican primary and still registered in the last 25 years. Their phone numbers, their emails, their whatever. You can actually even get all kinds of stuff, which is what magazines they read.
Right, the targeted and the
Of course, part of Trump's theory of the election, if he can be said to have a theory of the election and not just
he's got one.
But part of his theory is that he's going to bring new people into the process.
That's the whole basis
it's like
of
the
his fight
Obama theory,
in
right?
Virginia, the state of Virginia. He's having a big fight.
Exactly, because they have an open primary and they're asking essentially for a loyalty pledge from voters that they'll be loyal Republicans, and he's fighting that. And you'll hear a lot more.
Isn't he right,
from
though,
him about
Gene?
that.
I mean, isn't he right to want to expand their? I mean, isn't that at the root of all of my party's problems?
He's absolutely right on that. I mean, say
it again, because I don't know how many times I'm going to hear Gene.
Donald Trump is absolutely right on that question,
right,
and that's one of the weird things about Donald Trump, because he is so wrong on so many things that, I mean, we couldn't list them, but on some things he's absolutely right.
But being right on that question, and that's not, if you want to go back to the last election and see what the RNC wrote and their sort of call to action that this is what we have to do. We have to expand the party or we're never going to win the presidency. Is he doing what needs to be done to accomplish that? Those are two different questions.
Yeah, and this voter file merge suggests like we finally have the candidate and the party coming together in an institutionalized way. But to your point, the reason that the RNC jumps into this agreement is that because the more new people he brings into the process, the more data that they get themselves. So there's a mutual beneficial element.
Usually the rule is that when you use the list, you have to give it back with all the addendums that you put on.
Exactly, yeah.
So
and that may be Trump's great contribution to the Republican Party at all of his massive rallies.
To bring in a lot of people who hate the Republican establishment and only like Donald Trump.
We'll take him.
Does anyone actually think he's going to spend $2 million of his own money?
You know what he could spend it on, though? A 2-minute paid ad in Iowa teaching people how to caucus, telling where
I was gone.
We were wondering about if Donald Trump actually does run ads, Sam, what do they look like?
So unconventional that you can't possibly predict them on this show.
The only thing I can predict is that of the 30 seconds, 28 will
be his face.
Trump's face.
But seriously, he could. I mean, his challenge is viewed as whether he can convert new supporters, participants at his rallies, into caucus goers. And I think it would be smart to spend money putting up a 1 or 2 minute tutorial on the air in Iowa telling him how to caucus.
It's almost too late. I mean, what Obama did was start 8 months before. Yeah. Obama basically developed the model that both parties are now using,
which was an innovation from Bush 2000. Ken Mehlman was.
That's right. It was the segmentation of the electorate, and what Obama did was identify each one of those people, but you've got to have an enormous number of people on the ground. I think Hillary has something, I don't remember the exact number, but it's...
You had an incredible Iowa operation. I remember your people running around with their...
We did, but the discipline was the difference, and Obama was so disciplined, disciplined. Hillary's got, I don't know, thousands of people on the ground. That's what you have to have. I think it's too late for Trump in Iowa. He's going to get what he's going to get. He needs to do well. I don't think he needs to come in first. His primary, his vote is the primary stuff. That you can do an ad. Here's how you do it, and it's only one day. Caucuses are really complicated.
In the meantime, you mentioned
the selfie is now the 11th Amendment of the Bill of Rights. It's inspired by our framers and founders, apparently. It is a requirement that you take one, and I do it with great joy in my heart. It wasn't that long ago that people wanted signatures on things, and now, forget that. I want my damn selfie, and I'm not leaving until I get it. So we spend a lot of quality time doing that, and hoping the person has a long enough arm, or I will take over. Just for the record, young people do it better than older people. We'll go through a little training class here. It's cooler to do it diagonally rather than straight up. Remember that. And it's better to do it higher than lower because you look skinnier. Am I right?
Footloose and fancy-free, right? Jeb Bush there offering his keys to taking the perfect selfie, just as the framers of the Constitution intended.
It's a little painful.
Oh, come on.
It is.
Come on. He's hitting his stride there,
That's
Sam.
the stride.
Let's bring in MSNBC's Steve Kornacki here on set, and in Nashua, New Hampshire, NBC News correspondent Hallie Jackson. Hallie, let's start with you. You were at that Trump rally where he took the editorial page director to task, along with many others, Chris Christie and others. What was the energy like in that room? I'm guessing they applauded loudly when he did his takedown, as they always do.
Excellent guess, Nicole. Yeah, no on-stage selfies for Donald Trump, no stage directions there, but a couple of things stood out from that rally last night. Who he hit, who he didn't hit, and his discussion about how much money he's going to spend. You talked about him slamming the union leaders, slamming Chris Christie, slamming Joe McQuaid, the publisher of that paper. He went on for about 15 minutes out of his about hour and change rally, so it was pretty substantial. He kept going after it, and the crowd was quite into it. They were cheering, they were clapping, and remember, this is their New Hampshire paper. This is their local newspaper that they're talking about that was hitting Trump in that editorial. Noticeably and interestingly, he didn't hit, at least last night, Bill Clinton, who's been a target of his, online for days now, really ever since the Christmas break. And that's something that Trump noted right off the top of his rally. He came out on stage. He said, "It's great to see you guys. I've only been able to tweet so far. It's been a long Christmas break." But he didn't hit Bill Clinton. He did, however, get online and slam Clinton for campaigning for Hillary back in 2008, saying he failed on the campaign trail back then. And then interestingly, after the event, he went into the overflow room to say hi to folks in the crowd there. And he said he will start spending big money. He'll basically be unleashing some of his fortunes starting in about a week on January 4th. Donald Trump saying he wants to take no chances basically between now and the Iowa caucus. And that's really interesting because so far Donald Trump has spent the least amount of money of any candidate in the race, about $217,000, which is a pittance. At this point, he's been relying totally on earned media, so his ad buy could potentially change the dynamic as we look ahead to January. I had a chance to speak with some folks in the crowd just to get a sense of why they came out spending part of their holiday break between Christmas and New Year's listening to Mr. Trump. And I want you to listen to one conversation that I had with one couple from Nashua.
Why come out and spend a night with Mr. Trump?
Well, he's a man. We want to see him.
It's exciting.
Yeah, it's exciting.
He's got a lot to say. He's saying a lot of things that nobody else wants to say out loud, which is important, and they'll be heard.
People are fed up with the same old, yeah. And this man's bringing something refreshing.
6 weeks out, have you decided? Is Trump your guy? Oh, God.
Well, we still have a couple months to go, but we're certainly leaning heavily. Otherwise, we would be out here freezing tonight.
And that was interesting there when Ray kind of hedged and he said, well, we're still looking at who to decide. We're leaning towards Trump. It's that attitude that folks like Chris Christie are counting on in New Hampshire, guys. This attitude that, hey, there are still 5.5 weeks to go. So even though people might be turning out to these Trump rallies and telling pollsters that they'll vote for Trump, maybe when push comes to shove in 3.5 weeks, they'll change their mind.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting. He said leaning heavily, definitely making clear he was a supporter, but open to change his mind. That's very interesting. Thank you, Hallie, very much. Steve Kornacki, do you think that applies to a lot of folks at Trump rallies, that they're leaning heavily in his direction, but open to someone else?
Yeah, I think that applies to a lot of people at New Hampshire events. I mean, that's the New Hampshire way. You know, it's sort of a Trumpian thing, right? They know they have leverage because these candidates are there begging for their votes for months. So don't give away your leverage.
They like being courted.
Yeah,
until
February 8th or so, then make up your mind. But the bigger problem, I think, for that union leader editorial, the problem for the union leader, for Republicans, think like the union leader, do not want Trump as their nominee. They got to stop him in New Hampshire. And the problem in New Hampshire now is you got this logjam. You got Bush. You got Kasich. Kasich is registering in New Hampshire. You got Rubio. You got Christie with the union leader's endorsement. They're all running 9, 10, 11, 12%. You add those 4 numbers together, that's enough to beat Donald Trump in New Hampshire. Yeah. You divide it among 4, Trump is crushing him.
Yeah, you were cringing about Jeb Bush. You don't think Jeb's the one that's going to rise from the pack?
I'm not saying that. I just think his soliloquy on selfies was a little bit ridiculous. He's so hip.
He's standing there as a bridge between his generation and future generations.
Well, maybe not.
And he's right about shooting from above.
Yeah, he's totally right.
From Rosie Perez. Yeah, you always shoot up.
Yes.
I did not know that.
Yeah,
no.
There's
very
something on
critical.
Morning Joe every day, Chris.
A question for you. Do you think that Jeb, for all of his flaws and his selfie habits, does he have any legs in New Hampshire, which now seems to be, remarkably after $115 million raise, seems to be the critical state for him at this point?
I hate to say it because I personally like Jeb Bush, but I don't think he's got legs.
I think when you saying you personally like Jeb Bush, you're hurting his chances deliberately.
No, I like that clip because it is Jeb Bush. I know him a little bit, and he's an easy guy to be with, and he's funny. He's sarcastic. He's got this other side that you would like. And I just don't see his campaign going anywhere because his voters are all the other voters that like just exactly what you mentioned, Kasich and Christie, and that's who he's competing with. Yeah. And he's competing with who gets out. Maybe he'll come in 3rd by some miracle.
I want to
add still alive.
A good question for you. Is part of the issue with New Hampshire that because Cruz is likely to win in Iowa, he's not that moderate breakout candidate that could happen in New Hampshire. So,
Can you hold your answer? Because I want to get you on that question exactly. And I also want to bring in this piece in Politico. Kurt Anderson writes in Politico, Donald Trump isn't the biggest narcissist in the GOP field. Ted Cruz is.
There you go.
There's no denying that Cruz is a smart and gifted orator, but if you listen closely, you will find that he sells everything with the exact same level of zeal. Whether he is condemning the Islamic State or ordering a ham sandwich, the invective is identical. When a speaker oversells everything, it calls everything he says into question, and it begs the question regarding authenticity and genuineness. And when it comes down to it, Cruz does not stand by all that he so dramatically defends, but Cruz will never tell you he made a mistake or changed his mind. We never see an authentic Cruz because we never see a vulnerable Cruz. He's perfect. Just ask him. He's pure. Just ask him. So to Sam Stein's question and to this piece specifically.
Yeah, that also could be describing a lot of politicians, I think.
Really? You don't say Cruz.
I'm not. Present company excluded.
Yeah, I said most, not many, certainly not all. But
I think in this GOP field, though, Cruz is in a category of his own with this particular critique.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Arrogance, you could certainly apply to Trump as well, maybe a few others. But to the question about
But not inauthenticity. Trump's not being accused of being inauthentic.
No. Inauthentic, though, I think you could apply to other candidates, and I think that's probably a common one. I don't know. Maybe I'm sticking up too much for Cruz here.
No, don't worry about it.
In New Hampshire, though, the interesting thing is, right, I mean, if Cruz is well positioned in Iowa, history tells us the Iowa winner kind of bombs in New Hampshire. Huckabee went nowhere, Santorum went nowhere. Pat Robertson didn't win Iowa, but he was the breakout guy in '88. He did nothing in New Hampshire. So there's sort of like, we call it the establishment lane. Another term you could use is sort of the secular lane. Iowa is such an evangelical state. New Hampshire is actually, it may be the most secular state in the country. This even applies on the
I was just thinking about how Kerry in 2004, as you're very well aware, was able to parlay his Iowa win into New Hampshire, even though he had all these geographic advantages included. But you don't see that happening with Ted Cruz.
These states are separate. I think Iowa and New Hampshire, in a way they aren't on the Democratic side, are really separated now. So you get, we've come to a point where you get one person out of each state. And this is why I think the establishment really has to stop Trump in New Hampshire, because they're not going to put a win on the board in Iowa. I think that's going to be Cruz or Trump. And if they don't stop Trump in New Hampshire, I don't know how you jumpstart your campaign if you're Rubio or you're Bush after.
Exactly right.
Right. All right. Don't go anywhere. Stay with us. Still ahead.